much for joining us today. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's good to be here.
Dr. Beidel, can you tell us about the founding of UCF RESTORES and what ignited your passion to revolutionize the treatment of PTSD through virtual reality?
UCF RESTORES really started after the Pulse nightclub shooting. Before that, we'd been doing work with veterans and active duty personnel, but that morning we got a call from the fire department saying, could you come down here right now? We need you. And so we went down and helped out with first responders who were responding to the events. What we found was that first responders had a lot of trauma that they experienced, but no one was talking about it. And some of the treatments that were used for veterans were appropriate to be used with first responders. So we decided to open a clinic specifically to work with first responders. As part of that, virtual reality is just a natural part of what we do in treatment. So we added that part in as well.
How has virtual reality evolved over time, and what makes it particularly suited for mental health treatments?
When virtual reality first started, it was pretty clunky, just like computers were pretty clunky back in the 80s. And as the digital media got better, we were able to start having virtual reality that included people. So for example, at first you couldn't put people in virtual reality because people move in arcs as opposed to straight lines, and the computer equipment wasn't able to do that. So as the virtual reality got better, we were able to adapt it to more treatments. And I think particularly for mental health, people have a lot of negative ideas about what mental health is. They think they're going to lay on the couch and blame their mother for all of their problems. And this is particularly something that we find with young men. There's a stigma against going to treatment. And so when we tell them we're using virtual reality, it kind of busts all those myths and stigma they have about what therapy is going to be like. It intrigues them, and then they come and they see what we're doing and they can benefit from it.
Why do us mothers get blamed for everything?
That's right. So blame Freud for that one. So.
Could you explain how virtual reality treatments work? How do they differ from traditional therapies in terms of effectiveness?
When we're talking about treating PTSD or anxiety, we're talking about an anxiety-based disorder. The best treatment for anxiety is what we call exposure therapy. So if I asked you, how do you get over your fear of a dog? You'd probably say, well, I have to be around a dog. Well, yes, but if that fear was an IED explosion, or if that fear is the shooter in the Pulse nightclub, that's not something I can put you in contact in real life. The only other way I could do it is I could have you imagine that fear. But I can't control what's in your mind. So I could be telling you to imagine something horrific, and you could be thinking about puppies for all I know. So with virtual reality, we can cut that. We can actually present via the virtual reality the scenario, what happened to you. We can also include sounds and smells. And smells are particularly important because those are very emotional memories if there's a smell connected with it. By doing all that, we can create a more powerful exposure therapy. So VR is not a treatment, it's a powerful tool that we use to make treatment better.
Sounds almost like the 4D theater.
It's very much like the 4D theater.
Oh, wow. But you have a...
But we use a head-mounted display right now.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you walk us through what that's like, what that treatment's like?
So what we do in the treatment is we want to recreate what are those cues or triggers that we might call them that are bothering you, that are giving you nightmares, that are making you avoid certain places. So if we go back to the Pulse nightclub shooting, a number of first responders told us that the ring of the iPhone had become a reminder in some way for that night, because everyone was calling their loved ones who were unfortunately deceased or injured and couldn't answer the phone. So they would just hear all these iPhone rings going off.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
Yeah. So in virtual reality, what we can do is we can program that into the scene, and then we expose you or the person to it a number of repeated times. And what you learn is that, yes, one time when the iPhones were ringing, something horrific was happening, but that doesn't mean that every time an iPhone rings, that something bad is happening. You can think about it like we think about seeing a scary movie. So the first time I saw The Exorcist, I was scared to death afterwards, right? I couldn't go to sleep. But after you've seen it about 10 times, you're like, yeah, Linda, Blair's head's going to spin around. She's going to spit out pea soup, and you're not scared anymore. This is what we do with exposure therapy. We keep you in the situation, and you learn that these things lose their power to really affect your emotions.
I like how you say lose their power.
Yes, and that's really what it is. We don't make the memory go away. It would be wrong to say traumatic memories can be erased. They can't be erased, but they can be put in long-term storage in your brain so that it's not guiding everything you do every single day. When police officers couldn't put on their uniforms after the Pulse nightclub shooting because it reminded them, that's what we have to get over. That's what we have to get people to lose the power over.
What are some of the unique challenges, opportunities you've encountered in developing and implementing the virtual reality therapies?
I think one of it is that everyone's traumatic event is unique. Even if something happened right now in this room that was a traumatic event, you and I would have a different memory, a different view, because we're looking at different things. So part of it is you can't just say, oh, I'm going to develop a VR and it's going to fix everybody. Everybody has to have an individual event that they had and that we recreate. So that's one of the challenges, is how we recreate all these different traumatic events. I think the second thing is that what we found with COVID is the increase in telehealth. The problem right now is that we can't do virtual reality over the internet because we have to have someone who has a head-mounted display which gets hooked in to our computer. And the systems and the designs are just not there yet to allow this to occur between therapist and patient over the internet. So that's something that we're working on for the future.
You mentioned recreating these situations in the VR. How do you do that? And do you ask them specific questions so they do you draw? I'm just very interested in how you do this. Do you draw out that scenario?
We do. We draw it out. And what we do is we have someone, we tell them, walk us through what happened to you at this time. And so they will start to tell us about the beginning, where they were, what was happening, and they'll take us through the scene. But we'll also ask them, what are the things that really bother you? What are the cues that give you panic attacks? What are the sounds that you remember? So when we were down after the Surfside building collapse, one of the sounds that became a cue for many of the first responders doing the search and rescue were the sounds of the cranes. So the excavation cranes that were building, that constant sort of ringing became associated with, unfortunately, discovering people who were deceased as a result of that collapse. So we take those specific cues, and those are the ones that we focus on. People sometimes say to me, well, you treat sexual assault survivors. Why do you want someone to be comfortable being sexually assaulted? Well, I don't. It's a silly question. But if someone can no longer go into their bedroom because that's where the sexual assault occurred, or if they cannot walk down the street because anyone who's wearing a red shirt, that's the shirt that the perpetrator had on, those are the cues. Those are the things that we have to get rid of and retrain our brain that that is not a signal for danger every time that you see it.
What are the potential applications of virtual reality in mental health or medical fields?
I think one of the potential realities is really the idea of reaching more people by getting this to a place where we can do it over the internet. Because not everyone can come to Central Florida for treatment, although I would sure like it if they could, but that's not possible. So being able to do this over the internet, I think, has a lot of potential. I also think in the medical field, I think helping people understand what their disease is like. You know, we talk about words like cancer or heart attack. We don't really know what that is, but I think to be able to see that in 3 dimensions and understand what some of these things are that are the illnesses around us can really help us put it in its place in some ways and understand it's not unknown anymore. One of the things people most fear is not knowing. And so I think being able to handle that. And we know now that younger people are much more visual learners. And so virtual reality is a perfect medium to teach as well as to treat.
Are there any exciting projects on the horizon?
Well, we are working with a new company that will allow us to expand our virtual reality system right now. Right now, in order to develop a new scenario, I need a coder and I need an artist. We're hoping to get to the point where someone like me, who doesn't have a lot of computer programming experience, would be able to go into a library and simply by dragging and dropping be able to develop a specific scenario. There are people now who have mapped various parts of the world. So you can go on Google and get this building, for example. And so we would then be able to not have to draw the building, but just pull it down and insert it into a scenario.
So we did speak a little bit about how virtual reality can help with education. What do you see about the intersections between also art, entertainment, and other medical applications?
We actually did this at UCF when we were designing our most recent virtual reality system. We had the opportunity to include students who were in our School of Visual Design and also our Gaming Institute to develop this new system for us. And what we found is they were really impacted by the fact that they could do something that wasn't just another game, but something that truly was helping people and helping them get better. And so I think we're all interconnected. We need all parts of this to do really good virtual reality. And I think that training or having people from the arts or from education or even from computer science come and learn about this aspect and this power so that they see it's not all just fun games, but there are things we can do that really impact people's lives.
Yeah, that's something I was telling people about when, the gaming degrees first started coming out. I would tell people it's not just about games.
Yeah.
These simulations could be used for training and education and other things besides entertainment.
Obviously.
So it's a good career to go into, not
Yeah.
just to create, video games.
And video games are fun, but not just, yes.
Yeah.
So
What opportunities are there for volunteers, researchers, or community members to get involved with UCF Restores?
we are always looking for other researchers who want to be involved with our work because there's a lot of work to do, and we need bright minds and we need minds from different fields to help make it better. I think one of the things we're always looking for at UCF Restores is people who are committed to our mission and who can help us in that. And whether that is making a financial donation or helping find a way for people who live out of town to come and stay for our treatment program, which is 2 to 3 weeks long. Those are always things that can really be helpful. Because of HIPAA, we always have to be careful about having volunteers come to the center because we guard privacy with our very lives, and with the people we see, they're very concerned about privacy. So, but there are different ways that people can help support our mission by supporting the people who come to see us and just letting other people know that we're available. Our services, thanks to the Florida government, are provided at no cost. So treatment at UCF Restores is free. And so we want everyone to take advantage of it.
Keeping people private because of HIPAA. Can you share any success stories or testimonials?
Yeah, let me share one that I have permission. We don't have to use names, but I have permission to share. I was walking down the hall of the clinic one day, and I always introduce myself to people who are being treated here. I don't do the treatment, but I always want them to know who's in charge. And I knew this particular woman, and I knew she had been sexually assaulted in the military and had struggled for 30 years, had not been able to get treatment. And she had come to our center, and I went up and introduced myself, and she said to me, "I want to thank you. You've given me my life back." And I said, "I'm just sorry it took 30 years for this to happen." And she said, "Don't you be sorry." She said, "I've got the rest of my life ahead of me thanks to your treatment program." So that's what makes us get up every morning and go to work and reminds us that what we're doing is not just publishing research papers, it's changing people's lives.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Do you have any advice you would like to share with those who are interested in exploring virtual reality, whether for therapeutic use or creative exploration?
I think I usually talk about it from a therapeutic use, and I think that sometimes people can think that the VR is the therapy, and that's not correct because in the hands of an unskilled therapist, it's likely that virtual reality can actually make someone worse.
Mhm.
So, but I think that it is a very powerful tool. And one of the things we know is that the cost of it is really coming down. So the new system that we developed runs on equipment that costs less than $1,000. So it's really affordable for therapists to use something that is really this powerful. And so I think that that's the kind of thing that we need to keep in mind. And what I'd like people to know is that this is not just something that has to be done in an academic ivory tower. This is something that many clinicians can use in their everyday practice.
Okay, so we're going to do some rapid fire activity here.
Okay.
Myth or fact? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
PTSD can only be caused by experiencing combat situations. Myth or fact?
Myth.
People with PTSD are always hyperactive and jittery. Myth or fact?
Myth.
Trauma-focused therapy is the only effective treatment for PTSD. Myth or fact?
Fact. Depends on how you define trauma-focused therapy.
PTSD only affects adults. Children are immune to it. Myth or fact?
That's a myth.
Yeah, unfortunately. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
Experiencing a single traumatic event is the only way to develop PTSD. Myth or fact?
That's a myth.
PTSD is solely a result of personal weakness or lack of resilience. Myth or fact?
That's a myth.
Effective treatment for PTSD always requires medication. Myth or fact?
That's a myth.
People with PTSD are dangerous and prone to violent behavior. Myth or fact?
That's a myth.
PTSD only affects mental well-being. It doesn't impact physical health. Myth or fact?
Myth.
Yeah, mental health affects our physical health
Mhm.
as well. Sharing details of traumatic experiences with friends and family can worsen symptoms. Myth or fact?
Probably myth. It depends.
I had a family member who was in the Army and
Mhm.
went to Desert Storm and came back and could not talk about it.
And a lot of people can't talk about it and they won't talk about it
Mhm.
because what they say is, I don't want to put what's in my head in your head.
Mm.
So it's a problem with therapists sometimes too, because we hear a lot of things and we have to have a way of dumping them so
Mhm.
they don't become a problem for us as well. But it causes a lot of problems in marriages because the person doesn't want to talk about it and the other person is like, oh, he or she doesn't love me anymore because they never talk to me. Well, they're not talking to you because they don't want you to feel what they feel.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay, thank
I really
you.
appreciate you
Good.
being here.
No problem. Thanks
Very
for inviting me.
interesting.
Oh, good.
If you're enjoying this show, please subscribe to our channel and follow our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter accounts.